Hello there. This will be my video where I do a voiceover of the footage I recorded without sound. So I have a file in OBS now with about 4.5 to 5 hours of footage without sound. And yeah, I will explain what I was doing as far as I know what I'm doing. And because a lot of the time I have no idea what I'm doing. And so right, actually this is a second try because like this footage is without sound. I recorded about almost an hour of footage with the voiceover, but then when I listened to the results, I had some kind of weird thing in the audio where I think I was recording the mic twice in OBS. It's great to have a program with all of these possibilities, but sometimes I don't know all the ins and outs. Because the last video I recorded, I had some ugly cutoff in the sound a little bit. I played around with the filters a bit, so I really tested my sound before recording the voiceover for this video. But apparently either I didn't hear it or I changed something after that, but I have no idea. So second try. And normally all should be well now. Of course I tested it, etc., etc. So yeah, like I said, I have the file here in OBS, and I will play it, and then when I see parts where something has happened that I find interesting, I will comment on them. And right, that's it. Let's go. So mostly what I'm doing in this video is trying to implement my new grid, including the new sound shapes. And here, first thing I do is I stop making grid a subclass of board elements. For some reason that I don't remember, and in hindsight isn't what I should be doing, but yeah, there's a lot of fiddling around, just trying things out. Like I said, when I watch the footage without sound, a lot of the times I have no idea what I'm doing, and it's really, really painful to watch myself doing all kinds of things that now, because in the meantime I learned a bit more as when I was doing this. So that makes it even worse to see what I'm doing, because now some things I know. And a few of these things that I'm doing here, I know already that isn't going to work, and I change things back later. So, and yeah, so I had decided to start a bit from scratch with a grid class and make it a separate class and not a subclass of the other board elements. And here I'm tagging out the neighbor code that I don't need. That was in other videos. When I posted code from this class, ChatGPT was what's the word? Was using this neighbor code all the time. At one point, I was wondering even why does it do the neighbors and stuff? But it was because the code is in here. It was a tryout. I do need a neighbor code. Where I am at now, I'm trying to place first unit on the board and then move it. And for that, I need the neighbors. But then again, I need 6 neighbors for either tile type that I have for both tile types, and not 4 like in this code. So I'm just tagging out things, fighting with the brackets, it seems. So here I'm also tagging out the what does it do? Shape finds the shape, something that finds the neighbor shape, which iterates. That's about an array, a list, I think. And also tagging out the other inherited methods that were inherited because this was a subclass, and now that I made it a standalone class, it of course doesn't have inherited methods. Trying to run my code. which still works amazingly. Oh yeah, because I don't use the grid class at all at the current iteration of my code. Taking stuff out with the constructor, so it's now empty. And here I have, in the constructor, I make a shape and I seem to want to have access to the WH field. And I'm really struggling with these concepts here. With sub and super classes and how you have access to variables of other classes and even of super classes. I will ask ChatGPT about that later. Those concepts are much clearer in my head now. And here apparently I decided to have access to the WH parameters. It might still be better to make grid a subclass of board elements. And the logic is that everything that is used to construct the board, yeah, that's what the word says, it board elements. I have it's an abstract superclass, and then I have another abstract superclass above that. That's the board shapes. I need to clean it up and maybe join them. Here I try something else. Which is not a thing that inherits stuff, but that's not a thing. But I have, yeah, I can access variables, etc., from other classes, of course, but that's still, like I said, I know it a bit better now, but it's still very vague here. So I'm trying things to do things. So apparently I decide to remake it a subclass and then have access to the WH variables that I need. That's the position of anything in the grid arrays that I write in at this moment in the code. I create them in the board class. The shape is base hexagon. Yes, that's correct. That's very good. At least. Yeah, so now I have this inherited method, the shape. Each board element has a shape. Now I wanted to create a point on the grid on one of the vertices of the hexagon where the center of the circle tile is, the culture tile. Also with that, I'm like here I start doing something in the constructor. I'm really confused about how all of that works. But like I said, it was a lot clearer in my head after all that I did and all my questions that I asked to ChatGPT, etc. That's the great thing about it. You can ask it about all kinds of concepts and stuff. Yeah, I read a lot about people who wonder. I'm following some groups on Reddit about ChatGPT, etc. And yeah, some people that are really programmers can use it to help them write a lot of code. And I was so something anybody wondering, but if you're learning programming, whether it's good because it can take all kinds of work off your hands. But yeah, my opinion is if you're motivated to learn how it all works, and are conscious of the limitations because it can give you some code in a certain situation, and besides that, it might be wrong. You have to understand a bit what you want for it to write the code that you can use, but mainly it can help me write some code, but it cannot design a game for me, and it cannot design how I want it, how I want, yeah, the code to work. Like I read, people say, yeah, but a project and scalability, etc. It doesn't um, in the code that it gives, it cannot really include the whole structure you want, the whole how everything is connected, etc. Even if you could put your whole code in there with some plugins, etc., is kind of possible. Yeah, how you structure your program, etc., is of course also depends heavily on your preference, etc., the logic you have in your head. And the big advantage I find is that you can ask it about all those concepts and best practice, etc., etc. When you just ask it to write you some code, uh, it might not include those things, and it might not be clear for you if you're learning how all that is connected. Um, but the big thing is I want to understand what I use, what I copy, and most of the time I just write. I take its example, and write my own code. And even when I copy paste it, I want to know what it does. So everything that I don't understand or that I doubt, I can ask it what it does and how it works. And yeah, when I'm trying things out like this and messing around and just having really no idea what I'm doing, um, a lot of the times I spend some time on that trying things out, and then I'm like, oh, I could just ask ChatGPT. And the great thing is that I can ask conceptual things, stupid things like what's the standard structure of a Java class. This I forgot the term for them. If it's public, protected, or private, I forgot what it's called. Somewhere, maybe in this footage, I ask the what to give me a summary of what that does. If there's some concept in there that you don't understand, you ask it again. What does that mean? Explain it to me like I'm five, for example. And yeah, and sometimes even it gives when I'm asking something else, it's giving me some concept beside what I ask to explain a thing that I wouldn't otherwise. It's the first bit of this footage. There's some situation like that. So yeah, for me, it's not like a question if. Um, I think the usefulness is different when you're a programmer experienced and you know what you're doing. Then the usefulness is different, not like better or worse. Um, yeah, I have an example in this footage where it's telling things that aren't true. So yeah, that can be really confusing if you're learning to program. So yeah. Um, let's see what I was doing. Oh yeah, so here I'm still trying to create that point, which in the end turns out that I really don't need that point at all. The way I started learning this and structuring my code is a lot of the times it's like I'm playing with physical objects that I glue one object to another object to a certain point and that way of thinking isn't always how do you say it, the way to think when you're coding. That's what I'm discovering, what I'm learning. And here I have apparently I renamed the class, or I had another class that was called Grid Hexagon, and I got rid of the other one. And here I have, or I renamed it. I'm not sure. I don't have the footage of that. And here in the constructor, I'm still fighting with that point I want to define. And here in the constructor, I I have a new culture tile, new corridor tile. That's gonna be how I find a solution for this, because I want I will have an array of grid hexagons which make the grid, and then on each hexagon I want a culture and a corridor tile, the two types, the round one and the other bizarrely shaped one. And here I have them in the constructor, so that this will come back because at the moment, finally I find a solution that I doubt now, by the way. I will go back to that and try to find another solution. But at least it worked. Here I return to a conversation that I had already before recording this, apparently in ChatGPT, about the shape function I have, or a face method I have that has to return a shape. I'm kind of fighting, if I remember correctly, with the concept of certain objects of certain classes, etc., and how all that is working. It's something while doing all these things, so that in this footage I got pretty clear. So I demand some explanation how things are related. What do I ask here? Oh yeah, here I asked something about the face method defined in a superclass, and if I have access to it in the subclass. And yeah, of course, yes, etc. Inherited methods. I did work with that before, but sometimes I kind of forget how those concepts work. And then it explains how the method, how it searches in the class hierarchy to find the first implementation of the method, etc., etc. So yeah, here it's explaining all kinds of concepts with the use of my classes, and for me that's very, very useful. And I need to reiterate these kinds of concepts in different ways, and to really get a sense of how all that is related, how all that is working. So here I'm going on about that method. Oh, and I have a question. The way I wrote it now, will grid hexagon create an instance of the face shapes every time a new grid hexagon is created? Oh yeah, this is very interesting too. I saw this in the first try of this video. I ask if of an instance of the shape of that the shape that method returns, if an instance of that shape is created every time a grid object is created. So, and there I didn't ask for it, and it's something I didn't know, but which might be very important for optimizing code. Probably experienced programmers know that normally every time I create an instance of the class that contains that method, that returns that shape. So they're created together every time an instance of that class is created, the grid hexagon in this case. And there it explains that on the other hand, if the face method caches the shape object and returns the same instance every time it's called, then only one shape object will be created and reused for all grid hexagon objects. And then it gives right away, it gives an example how I could cache the shape and check if there is a cached shape, and if not, it creates a new instance of that shape. So that's very interesting. And I noticed this is still GPT 3.5. I've noticed that in GPT-4 it uses more of those checks than before. If that is no, etc., and all those kinds of things. But this is super useful because I'm just asking a conceptual thing, like does it create an instance of that every time I create an instance of that? And then it explains, but you can also cache that object of that thing, and if it doesn't change, the same object can be reused all the time. And that seems pretty important for resource management and efficiency, as far as I understand it now. So that's very useful. Like, yeah, that would be a thing. Otherwise, I might have come across that at some point. But yeah, I'm just I really love that it does these kinds of things sometimes. Especially when you're learning, it can be really useful to come across concepts that you don't know yet, and if it's too complicated, you just ask to ChatGPT to explain it further. So And one of the things that I tried while doing all this is moving my random function that selects a random for each type, the cultures, the circles, and the corridor tiles. For each of those types, I have 4 different terrains, and the random function to select the different terrains is now uh, in the board class where I construct the board. And I was trying to move them to the the superclass of the tile type, so the culture tile class and the corridor tile class. I was trying to implement that every time I instantiate a specific terrain tile, and so it uses the superclass that is the tile type, like I said, like the circle or the other one, and I try to put it in there instead of the board class. And I also asked ChatGPT how to do that, and I just had to place it over there. But I comment I can already tell that it didn't work out in the end the way I wanted it, with all kinds of stack overflows and everything. So yeah, and I seem to have moved those there, and yeah, now I know that the way I'm doing that isn't really working, because the board class isn't in the board element tree with all the subclasses for all the different board elements. So it's an independent class where I create instances of those other of all those board elements, etc. And yeah, I should have done that. I think I know now how to make that work with not the way I'm doing it here, because I get infinite loops, stack overflow. Yeah, so I'm just trying to replicate the code that and the variables that I use in the other class to assign one of the random terrain types to a variable. If I understand it better now, I shouldn't do this in the constructor, but in a method that assigns uh, those terrain types. But I'm trying. On top of that, I have a typo here. I write tile with a Y instead of an I, and that's something I found out a lot later. And in the meantime, I'm like, why doesn't it work? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And because yeah, some places I write it with a Y, and other places with an I, and what ChatGPT returns is with an I also. So typos can be hassle. Yeah, like I said, I the for the in my understanding, a better way to assign those different terrain types randomly is to do it in a method. But here, what ChatGPT is giving me is it's doing that in the constructor, like I'm trying to replicate, or actually I took my code from the board class where it is in a method, and I'm putting that code in the constructor of the culture tile. But there in my code, I instantiate a new instance of that class, and what ChatGPT is giving as example is another method. Um, it's signing. I don't know exactly how this is called, um, but it uses this capitalized name of them, and that's I read it somewhere. That's I forgot how that's called. an enumeration, I think, and that means that you how to explain that if I hardly understand it myself, that you have um, a value, not really a value, was it? I don't really remember the difference, but it's like a type of field, a variable, but I think it's like a name you give to a certain class or something like that, and and then the name is um, in all caps. Um, and this might work, I think now, but I was trying to use my old method that I had with instantiating classes directly with his example. So I was like, oh yeah, but I don't want that with the enumeration. I want the other thing, and then I created infinite loops as far as I understand it now in hindsight. So yeah, like I said, another way to do it is create a method outside of the constructor that assigns a value, a random value to that to the tile type field. It's actually good for me to rewatch it, especially now it's the second time, to see if I understand better what where I was going wrong. Then it's pretty actually actually pretty useful. So yeah, and what I'm trying out is just messing around a bit because what I just said wasn't clear at all in my head. So pretty frustrating to watch. Yeah, an enumeration. And here I decide to ask something that I probably can't formulate right. I ask if it, what if every tile type creates a class of that name? I'm not sure what I was looking for then, but it gives me code to instantiate or to create whole classes with the same kind of code or with the same random function, but in every case create the class, in fact. So that's not at all what I'm looking for, but it's it's pretty interesting that it gives me the whole code how to create classes from within the code without creating them manually. It's pretty cool. This is one other interesting thing. That's not something I was looking for, but it's very interesting to see that that's possible. It's another thing that otherwise I probably would have noted that it's at all possible, and now I see it. So it it augments. What is it? It gives me more familiarity with possibilities. Oh, rewind. So here I posted my culture tile class. Then that device a few issues that should be addressed. There's a problem that is a tile object and not a tile type object. And that's where I go wrong. It has a tile type object that it has created, which has these enumerations that different classes that can be associated with it. And in those things, you can define what it does. If I said it correctly, probably not. Oh, and there it says it returns a tile type which does not exist, and you can return a tile type field with a Y. So that's what is the word? That's my typo. And there's a problem in the loop also. It only uses the last case because it will iterate through all of them. If you want to assign one random culture tile to each culture instance, you should move the loop outside the constructor and generate a single random culture tile for each instance. So yeah, I'm fighting with my lack of understanding of these things. Oh yeah, and I had that loop in there for some reason that was useful when I was filling an array, but not for this, where I just want to create a random terrain type for every culture tile that is instantiated, and I don't want to fill an array with that. And that's conceptual. That was pretty new for me conceptually. Still is. Like I already said, I'm pretty much a total noob, so. Oh yeah, so in here I try to add the point between my and take away my new thing, instantiating a new object. I try, like ChatGPT, to put a point in there, but yeah, without the enumeration thingy, that won't do a thing, of course. So I'm really being lost here, totally lost. Yeah, here I'm pointing to the thingy here, and yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. And I vaguely remember that I was like, but why does it do it like that, etc. But now I understand that this is a more straightforward way of doing it. Like I said, I think that I can do this with a method as well. Yeah, and below its code example, it explains how that works, but yeah, I'm missing the explanation for those, or missing, yeah, for somebody that knows a bit of coding, it's probably obvious, but those all cap things behind that tile type point something, that's just for different, like I think it's called enumerations of tile type, which only exists to assign one of these to this constructor when it constructs an instance of this class. But at this moment of this footage, I'm missing the knowledge to do something useful with it. Because as far as I know, you have to assign an instance of that class to this. And that's what's lacking in the explanation at this point. So it doesn't help me much. It's just very confusing. And I don't know, I don't get the idea to ask the right question that it explains it to me here. So somewhere in a later footage, I do get the same kind of thing, and then I get some explanation. That's why I kind of know a little bit what's all that about. Yeah, so I think I start to realize I have a get tile type and a get tile name method now, trying to implement tile type and tile name, which is actually the same thing. So, and it's kind of confusing with the two different tile types, with the circles and the other one, because it's kind of a type as well. So it seems like I'm fighting with the naming convention a bit. Yeah, like here you can see in the specific terrain class that I've tile name hills and tile type hills. That's kind of useless. Although the one is a string and the other one can be a value of a field tile type. But it's pretty easy to use that string as well as that string or the class name or anything. It's like it's getting kind of redundant, and I already gave them all a name, which is the same as the name of the class, which is the same as the terrain type. That might be, by the way, a good convention to call that terrain type to not have confusion with the tile type. I'll write that down. So yeah, I have deleted the get tile type function, left the tile name, and in the superclass for the terrain types, I set for the name to return null, and it's inherited by the subclasses, the method, which returns the name. It seems like I decided to do some cleaning up, getting rid of a method that returns this string. Also related to the tile name, it was I had some redundant things that I wasn't even using, some tryouts. Now I decided to implement the same code to randomly generate the terrain type and also in the corridor type. And here you can see in the board class that I'm filling an array with objects of those classes. And in here it's a random function that has a loop, an iteration, etc. And here it works. But the way I'm trying to just move this to the constructor of the tail type doesn't work. So pretty optimist of mine to apparently come to the conclusion that what I had in the other tail tab was good enough, and now I've decided to try and make it work in the second tail tab as well. Yeah, well, that's not going to work. Oh, and this is pretty funny. Like, this is what ChatGPT is really good at. I'm asking it. I'm in a chat here with where I asked if it can give me an overview of a standard Java class and its standard elements. And like I said, when nothing else, it's great as a talking encyclopedia because yeah, all these things is written. There's so much written information about those things online, and that's I think that is where it, like I said, if nothing else, that's where it excels. It just gives a summary of basic principles. You can ask. Yeah, it gives you an overview of like really the simple things, and then there's one thing. Oh, can you tell me more about that, etc., etc. And you can go on and on and on until you start to get an idea of yeah of the thing you want to get, you want to understand. And and here I have another question: when I define a field in a superclass, do I have to redefine it in a subclass when I want to use it there? And yeah, no, of course not. But I really didn't know that very well. So yeah, it explains me again that in subclasses you have access to those fields and the value assigned, etc. And if the field is visible, it's protected of public access. And with a dot operator on an instance of the subclass. So that also goes to the other thing with the all capital. You have an instance of a class, which with that enumeration, like I said, I'm not exactly sure how it's called, which you have different versions, different states of that class, and you can access them with an operator, like you can access uh, like fields and even methods, as far as also methods. The dot operator, it's nice. Yeah, that's an example. Like, and now I'm telling this, I'm like, I have to ask ChatGPT to explain the functionality of the dot operator, for instance, um, to explain that in detail, what it actually does and what its limitations are. What you know. So here it gives a little code snippet to illustrate that. And when the field is private, you can not directly access it from the subclass. You can provide accessor methods in that superclass to allow subclasses, etc., to modify the field indirectly. So to take the value of that field and modify it, I think, add to it, subtract to it in that way without modifying the original instance of that field. What is it called? The language. Uh, Forgive me if I get the language wrong all the time. And then below here, I saw that in my first try of this video, something that I didn't notice very well before, but I noticed it in reviewing, that it says it's worth noting that if you redefine a field in a subclass with the same name as a field in the superclass, the subclass field will hide the superclass field, and the subclass will have its own independent copy of the field. So it overrides that field in that subclass if it uses the same name and the same object, of course. And in this case, you can access the superclass field using the super keyword. And it says, however, it's generally not a good idea to hide superclass fields in this way, as it can lead to confusion and bugs. Instead, you should use different names for fields in the superclass and subclass to avoid name conflicts. Yeah, so what I understand here might be that I'm understanding wrong, or it's explaining it wrong, that when I use super in the constructor, which I use a lot, that I create an independent copy of all the fields of the superclass in the subclass. Or is it telling me that I shouldn't redefine? Yeah, I think that is the way to use the same fields as in the superclass in the subclass. You can use the super keyword. And it tells me that's not a good idea. And yeah, I didn't get the implications of that. So yeah, like it's explaining me that's bad practice. So I feel the need to review why I use that all the time and if that's a good idea. Because for example, the WH variable, I use them all the time in all my classes because those are coordinates, and there a lot of the time those are attributes for the different classes that they need to that should be that I should be able to assign to them or that get assigned to them. Those are I think arguments is the word. Those are arguments that I should be able to get assigned. So that's why I think I'm using that a lot. And I should probably rethink the way I'm doing that. So yeah, just racking my brain here. Racking my brain, and which must sound to anybody who knows about programming like the ramblings of a madman. But anyway, that's the cool part is that I didn't really, when I was making this footage, I didn't really notice that. In reviewing, I did notice that it was explaining something that was not really included in my question. So that's great. So here I posted the error message that I got. Apparently, I tried to run my code, and now I have in the infinite recursion, aka Stack Overflow, or Stack Overflow probably can have different causes than infinite recursion, but I have an infinite recursion with the things I talked about before, with trying to instantiate instances of those terrain type classes in their superclass, and etc., creating an infinite loop. And now I'm trying to find out why that is, how it's coming, and I see that now I know kind of what the cause is. At that moment, I was lost. It's because, like here in the constructors, I have those. I instantiate those things, and I post the culture tile class again with the random function, and then I ask it if it can tell me how that generates an infinite loop. What's the cause? So here it explains in really like I'm five, huh? It explains, including the random function. It explains that the culture tile constructor calls the grass constructor to create a grass instant, and then the grass constructor calls the culture tile constructor to create a new culture tile instance. Oh, for the culture center, Oh, there's more in there even. And then that culture instance calls the hills constructor, etc., etc. It goes culture and that's because I have those. I try to initiate those, instantiate those classes inside the constructor that itself is called because it's a superclass of those classes, etc., etc. And yeah, it's pretty funny how the way it explains. I like the way it explains like 9 times the same thing with all the different subclasses, and then steps 2 to 9 repeat indefinitely, creating an infinite loop. You know, it's I think it's pretty humorous, and then it gives me a little solution. Yeah, what she talked about before, maybe it was in the same conversation about creating um, those classes, but that's not the solution I'm looking for. Yeah, and it's talking about the solution where it takes a parameter. Uh, that's it. Yeah, it uses like creating the classes, etc. So not what I'm looking for at all. And then I think like suddenly uh, I'm focused on the draw method that I use to draw the texture on the tiles, and I post that in the chat and then ask it to give me some reasons why this wouldn't work anymore. Yeah, sometimes I amaze myself at the simplicity of my questions. But the great thing about it is you can ask all the stupid questions you want, and it gives me like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reasons, causes, or things that can cause it to not work anymore. Like before, it implies it before I imply before it worked, etc. And yeah, that's what I love about it. And then here, yeah, it's about I could have changed the names or even the placement of the files on my hard drive, permissions, etc. But it's actually point one. No, it says is not if the image is not found at a specific location. Blah blah blah. It says permissions, changes, class name now, but that's actually the reason isn't there. But in his first response, it's like globally when the image is not found at location. But actually, what the problem I have is it's just that the value it returns at the moment, because all the things I'm doing wrong with trying to change my code, it just has a null value. It's just empty. It returns an empty. Yeah, it returns an empty value. But yeah, again, I think it's great. It's sometimes the more stupid your question, the more you learn with the ChatGPT, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, now I have the genius idea to return a null value on purpose. So yeah, I'm going to mess around with it a bit. So then I decided to post my error log, whatever it's called, again. And then it explains, yeah, that the load image is called repeatedly, but that it has. Yeah, in fact, it wasn't returning a null value. It was because of the infinite loop. It was calling it over and over again. So that's not a problem with the draw function or null value. It's just still the infinite loop that's the problem. And then I had the great idea to take those draw functions and everything that it needs take them out of my board element class where that's where where that is situated, and try to move all that to the, I don't know, not till the draw, or maybe even later. And move that to my tau class for some reason. I think that suddenly it's going to work. And then I realize I have to move all the fields, etc. as well. And I have a method here in the constructor that I have to move as well. That's the way a lot of the times I'm messing around. And I already had a load image method here in the constructor that was tagged out. Something I tried somewhere in the past already, probably. Yeah, and I was moving stuff around, and now I decided to comment out the code I used to put my temporary little square shapes on the board, that the placeholders for units that I had before when I clicked on the board. And but all this is still because I'm trying to figure out why I have this Stack Overflow and trying to fix it. And that's the way it goes. A lot of times with me, that I'm just trying to find out, and I have some idea that maybe it's maybe it's that, but I have no idea where it's coming from right now at the moment of this footage. And yeah, I'm just trying all kinds of things. And yeah, because the concept of the recursion is pretty vague to me, and here it was. I didn't even understand that was the problem. I think I'm just like, oh, I have errors, there's problems, and so yeah, sad to watch. Oh, yeah, one of the things I noticed here is that I'm still in the board where I construct the board. I still have the random function as well. So I'm trying to run the code, and I still had the culture and corridor arrays, and those are two separate arrays combined together just visually, which I want to replace with a grid array. That's one array that contains those hexagons, and which contain the different tile types. I'm still, so I try to move that random selection of the terrain types to the specific type, the circle and the other one, and then I still have it in the code in where I create the board. So I'm trying to run something. Oh yeah, no, but yeah, I wasn't using. Of course, it could have worked if I wasn't using that grid functionality at all. In that case, it could have worked. No, it couldn't have worked because I changed, like I said, in culture tile and corridor tile, which are the superclasses for the terrain types. I put those random thingies in the constructor. So yeah, I was instantiating them here. I was instantiating them in a superclass of a subclass. So it's just one big mess. So yeah, no wonder it doesn't work. And now apparently I have decided to replace that with the maybe that's what I was telling myself over here, and now I'm replacing those with the grid hexagon array. So with the new grid array, here's the functionality for drawing the different elements in those arrays. So, but they are all based on the culture and corridor tile arrays, so those aren't going to work anymore. No idea what I'm doing here. I'm doing something with a corridor face shape. So a face is then the surface of a shape. No idea what I'm trying to do here, honestly. I'm posting that code snippet and a piece of code from the board element. How to how do I create an instance of corridor face in the class corridor tile? Question mark. With all the code. I honestly don't know why I wanted to do this. Yeah, I was on another row trying to do something that I wind up doing differently, so I don't remember exactly what I was what I was tripping about. I'm still fighting. I'm still trying to make that shape object in the corridor class, and I'm fighting with the difference between the area and the shape. Oh yeah, oh that's why I wanted to have that face for the neighbors. I was trying to implement that right away. So, but I'm asking what is the best for neighbors. Of course, rectangle. That's the most easy way. That's obvious. Like I should have had a rectangle grid. That's more easy for everything. Right. Um, I'm making an annotation about whether I really do need that face face shape or that face area for the neighbors because it's already in the shape class. That's true, and also I need to find neighbors in an array. And there might be some overlap with the shape and the shape functionalities in the Java library. But so now I'm starting to add those three zones that I made another video about. I think I made I made a video about the implementing the point I needed for those zones, those three zones that I want to have on the corridor to have the different positions for placements on there. I'm not sure if at this point, because the video I made here, I took multiple videos that I started editing before and cutting out silence, no silence, taking notes for etc. and cutting out stuff, and I joined them into one video to do this. So it's possible, seeing my notes, I might even have mixed up the order of things. Anyway, but I'm not sure if, at this point if I resolved the Stack Overflow issue. No, I don't, because I still have the random train selector here. Again, I'm trying to do a new instantiate another thing in the constructor, which, as far as I know, as far as I remember, is never a very good idea. But okay, so I'm starting to. Oh yeah, I'm putting it outside the constructor now. Yeah. So I decided I'm fighting with those shapes, the shape library, and then I'm asking if I can create instantiate an instance of shape. And it explains that shape in fact is an abstract class, so that you cannot create an instance of it directly. And that however there are several concrete classes that implement the shape interface. And so the rectangle, the ellipse, path, polygon, etc. So it's like you see, it's a really basic concept that when trying to create my thingies. So I can declare a variable of type shape, but I cannot instantiate a shape. And by the way, that's something I see now that I wasn't conscious of, I think, when I learned this. Yeah, but those basic things, and it's also that's a library but those principles also apply to my own code, of course. So yeah, those are very important concepts to understand. And yeah, I admit that's when you're starting out and learning. It's I learned a bit about the basic from guides and etc. and the principles, but yeah, if you don't have experience, like I said before, it's people think, yeah, but when you use, like for instance, ChatGPT to write code for you, etc., then yeah, it's good for quick and dirty. In my opinion, anything that gets you to your goal, put it on pause right now. Everything that gets you to your goal um, is a good thing, and if it's quick and dirty, it's quick and dirty, but it still gets the thing done. If later on you run into problems, which of course when you don't, uh, yeah, like when you're badly educated in principles and ideas about programming, then of course at a certain point, if you try other things, you run into problems. But then you can find the solutions to those problems and learn more about those principles. And that's also the problem with, like I said, when I started up, but it's a few years ago, I tried to learn pretty much about basic principles and etc. online, and I browsed through some books about basic object-oriented programming. But when you haven't tried it yet, and when you haven't had experience with trying things out, there's only, at least for me, there's only part of what the theoretical side of things you try to learn that you really grasp. So yeah, a lot of those principles I'm seeing here, I probably read about them, but there's no, what is it called in English? You don't have a reference to what it actually means. So you can try to absorb all kind of theoretical info, but yeah, you need to do, but that's, yeah, in education, of course, I think it's a common concept. You have to need to do exercises and etc. and try things out, and yeah, so, but yeah, it takes time. It takes time. It takes, you have to have the the going back and forth from theory to practical to theory to practical. And yeah, that's what I said before in this recording. I think I love the ChatGPT way of uh, the utility of it. Exactly for that, you can go into general principles and you can go into practical examples and all of that while asking stupid questions. So yeah, I think that's, for me at least, it works great. But I feel, like I said, that depends what you want. If you just trying to create a thingy and you can describe it and you just want the code for it and how to implement it and whatever, yeah, go ahead. When you try to build on that later and you run into limits or whatever and your lack of understanding, you'll notice and you'll change it. I mean, probably not the it's probably not that your life depends on it. So for me, that's also a process of learning. I myself, I like to understand exactly what I'm doing and why it works and why it doesn't work, etc. I'm the kind of person that doesn't really allow himself shortcuts, but and in general, but like when I see what kind of a mess I made in my code, just, yeah, I'm just building stuff with what I know, and the more I learn, the more I see that everything I was doing is pretty ridiculous. So yeah, like everyone to the best of their knowledge, I think, right? Okay, let's go on. So yeah, some basic explanation about the safe shape class. And can I create an instance of path to D? Yes. Yeah, that's like I said, a concrete class. Like I said, it's great when you ask stupid questions all the time. Infinite patience. So yeah, because I want to implement those three corridor zones, which are like squares. I don't remember the word in English. That like squares that are moved to one side. Um, I don't remember the word in any other language either, by the way. Anyway, they're not squares, they're like transform squares, just with 4 points and 4 lines. Yeah, in another video I defined a point for that, and now I also create the... Oh no, I already create those. Yeah, that's why I refer to board shape. I already created those shapes, of course, in the other video with the points. And here I just ask. By the way, yeah, I instantiate a new path to D. I don't know why I don't just use the shape that I already have in board shape. Like again, it's a lack of understanding, total lack. And on top of that, I'm using the board shape, point, etc. And while I should just be able to access that directly here, because this is a subclass of board elements. So yeah, all kinds of unnecessary stuff again. Oh, so this is a while later. I did get it to work again. And without the textures here. So you see the basic shapes of the circle tile and the corridor tile. Did I... there's a piece of recording missing where I fiddled with all this in between. I see that I did take out the random terrain generation stuff in the culture tile. It's commented out. Yeah, I moved it back to where I create the board. And yeah, I'm using the grid, the hexagon grid. And in there, oh yeah, I have a solution here where, yeah, I'm missing footage of that, or I really put stuff in the wrong order. But it's possible that I didn't record me figuring out the stack overflow problem. And now I have a solution that ChatGPT gave me some one time. Oh, I put it on pause here. Here I have a solution now where the grid hexagon takes 2 more arguments. It has the W and H arguments, but it has a culture and corridor tile argument. Yeah, that's what ChatGPT suggested at one point, because I want every instance of grid or grid hexagon, I want them to have one random culture and one random corridor tile. And seeing that I didn't get it to work in that specific culture tile and corridor tile class at the random assignment, I assigned them here. And that's probably, like, I'm thinking out loud right now, that's probably why in the end it suggested me this way, because I think it should be able to work like I tried the first time, but doing it the right way. But anyway, yeah, so I don't really like to pass them as arguments. I like I say, I don't know enough about programming to know whether that's a good way or a bad way to do it. But for me, it feels wrong. No, I don't like it. Um, so I will ask it later on. I will ask it for other methods to do that. Um, like I said, I might get it to work the way I tried it before, assigning the random thingy elsewhere. But then again, I remember when I was finally moving this random stuff back to where I create the board. It is also, yeah, not necessarily a bad thing. For me, it was kind of, yeah, like I in the board I create the array of the grid stuff, and it's not the place to assign those random terrain types. I was like, that should be done just in every instance of that specific tile. That should just be randomly assigned, a terrain type randomly assigned. Um, then again, uh, like when you would want to create a board manually, pick the terrain manually, um, it should probably not. Yeah, that would be a good reason. It should not. Oh, by the way, but that's a problem when I have. Yeah, that's also a problem when grid hexagon. No, no. That could be manually. I wanted to say when there's two, when it's arguments. But yeah, like I'm thinking, when you want to pick a train time manually and the superclass of that class that I use to assign the terrain type, and it's a class because I want there's more functionality based on the terrain type than just the terrain. But there's more, so I think it should be a class. It's not just like a color or something. Um, yeah, the way I do it here would be stop moving the screen. um, yeah, that would be more easy to later on define this manually, that this is like the auto-generated board. So in that sense, it might be a great place actually to assign the random tile. So yeah, but I'm still not convinced with the arguments here. I have the impression that there should be a better way to add quotes connect um, or put on. I wanted to have like the grid is like the grid, and I put tiles on there in code. That's the way I think about it, and I'm pretty sure there should be a better way. And it's like it's not just like before. It was only visual. It should be connected. Like the grid position has coordinates, and those coordinates are the same for the culture and the corridor tile. Yeah, and they're separate from their designation. So in that sense, this might be the best way to do that. I'm really not sure. So I'll stop blabbering about that and go on with the video. So I was only in the last example. I was only drawing the culture tile and only the outline because I apparently I still have the um I only draw the culture tile outline, and here not the textures, and here I had it tagged out. Here I'm adding the draw for the corridor tile, and now you can see that I had, so in the footage before I only had the circle with the thick border. Now I told it to draw the corridor as well. So now you have this. And the fun thing is that the highlight function I have just highlights any shape. So when you move around, even you can see the hexagon from the grid behind in with a thin line, and everything gets highlighted, but it gets highlighted on top. So here you have the hexagon and the corridor highlighted, so it's more white. And when I move to the triangles, it's even a shade lighter. I know it's the same shade, but it's I think it's pretty funny that it highlights it. Good way to test things also. Not something I want to keep, of course, going on, but yeah, so here it seems to be working again. It might be that I fixed all that and didn't record it. So now I'm going to switch the load image function, the draw function. Oh, that's still in tile. Is that going to work? Probably not. Oh yeah. So, and with the textures on there, and you can still see the outline of the hexagon that's getting highlighted. Yeah, so here I have all the conversations I had with ChatGPT about that that Stack Overflow, about that infinite recursion problems. And by the way, here I ask how does the board element constructor call the culture tile constructor? I'm just asking, and here, by the way, this is an example where it confused me big time because it gets the order of things wrong. So I ask, how does the board element constructor call the culture tile constructor? A board element is an abstract superclass of culture tile, and then it says that it doesn't call the culture constructor directly. However, since board element extends culture tile, by the way, that's something I only notice it now. Board element doesn't extend culture tile because it's a superclass. And then the board element constructor indirectly calls the culture tile constructor through the chain of inheritance, which is in a way true, but it's the inverse. Because what I understand is that if the subclass is instantiated, it iterates kind of through the constructors of its superclasses. It's like a two-way road, but it's the terms it uses are in inverse right here, and that's was very confusing. Here it does say it right. When you create a new instance of a subclass of board elements such as tile or corridor tile, the Java runtime first creates an instance of board element, which is the superclass of tile, and then initializes the subclass instance using the appropriate constructor. So yeah, it has like this cascading workflow. So when you create a new tile instance using the constructor new tile WH, the following happens. The Java runtime creates a new instance of board element using the default constructor. Since board element does not have a specific constructor defined in this example, boom, boom, boom. The tile constructor is called with super. This calls the board element constructor with super, which initializes the superclass instance. So yeah, that's correct. As far as I know, the tile constructor initializes the tile instance by setting its width and height fields, blah, blah, blah. And there it does it again. Since board element extends culture tile, the culture tile constructor is indirectly called when the board element constructor is called. This happens because board element inherits all the fields and methods of culture tile, including its constructor. Yeah, so it doesn't inherit. Like it explains in some way when I create an instance of a subclass or a superclass or whatever, it's related, but it doesn't inherit because it's the abstract superclass. Oh, and there it's what I think is wrong as well. You cannot instance superclass, an abstract class. Excuse me. So there I'm very confused at that moment, and I'm like, how does board elements inherits from culture tile? Board elements is a superclass for culture tile. and then it's, oh, you are correct. That board element is superclass of culture type. Apologies for the confusion in my previous message. And this is actually a thing I read about. I heard more about that. That ChatGPT is at least the version 3.5 was, but this is still 3.5, is sometimes pretty confused about the order of things. So it doesn't know if one thing comes after the other or before the other. It doesn't have that kind of logic. So with these kind of things, especially when you're learning, it's pretty important that one class extends the other and that it inherits and what the order of things is. So it's already kind of confusing because it goes kind of down the chain of inheritance and up the chain. There's some overlap in there, which is already hard to wrap your brain around, at least for me, when you're not a pro, when you don't know all those things, understand them really well. So when it starts to mix up its terms, that's really confusing. So, but I was thinking at that moment, like I must have done something really weird that that board element inherits all the fields from culture tile. But yeah, it's kind of true, but it's the way it expresses it is just so confusing. So, and after its apology, it explains it a bit better. So after its apology, it explains it a bit better. When a class extends another class, and it inherits all the public and protected fields and methods of the superclass. In the example code you provided, the culture class extends the tile class, which in turn extends the board element class. So the culture tile class indirectly inherits all the fields and methods of the board element class. When you create a new instance of the culture tile class using the constructor new culture tile blah blah blah, the culture tile constructor calls the tile constructor with super wh. This in turn calls the board element constructor with super, which initializes the superclass instant. So even though the culture tile class directly extends tile, it also indirectly extends board elements, and thus inherits all the fields and methods of board element. Right. This when it this is the right way of formulating it, and the response above that, it was mixing up the order of things. It's all related in two directions, but it's, yeah, when it starts to mix up the terms, it gets really confusing really quick, at least for me. And this is just one of the limitations that you have to be conscious of. And like I said, when you're learning, that can be pretty confusing. And I'm not sure how good GPT-4 is with this compared to 3.5, because some things are pretty much improved and others are not. So here I'm implementing a class for every corridor zone, all the 3 corridor zones. That was advice from ChatGPT. So here I'm implementing the inherited methods. So instead of returning the shape in the other class, I make it return the shape here. And seeing that I created a class for each zone, now I'm instantiating that class instead of I was instantiating a path. Now I'm instantiating the class in here under in the corridor tile. Oh yeah, apparently I created a superclass for them, a corridor zone class, and 3 directional subclasses. So now I'm declaring a variable of corridor zone that's called corridor south, etc. Not sure if I keep this in the end. And then I have to draw them, of course. Corridor tile, corridor zone south, draw. Trying it out. And there I'm testing if it does work. But look in the, I pause it. In the, I'll zoom in a bit. Zoom in a bit. Notice the upper left corner. I think I didn't notice it in the beginning. There's a little triangle in the upper left corner. And I'm looking on the board at whether I have the zones that highlight when I mouse over and doesn't do anything. But if I remember correctly, I'm battling with this a bit before I noticed that triangle in the upper left corner. Yeah, we'll watch ahead and see when I find this out. So I decided to ask my little digital friend for some answers. I posted, I'm not sure what I posted, it was too fast, but watch it. Corridor tab probably. Oh, I could have seen it there. Oh yeah, it was corridor tile class, and I asked whenever instance of corridor tile to instantiate contain all 3 corridor zones. How could I do that? Yeah, and there again, it does a weirdy thing, or weird, probably isn't weird, in the arguments with the all caps thingy and with the direction. So it goes to this quite a lot, and I have how all the stuff in the arguments works is still pretty much fake to me. Here I've modified the corridor tile constructor to create new instances of corridor zone for the south. New instances, yeah. Instances that corridor zones. So yeah, there it says these corridor zone instances are then stored as fields in the corridor tile class. I don't know if it's what it's saying here is correct, but apparently this has something to do with how it created an as far as I know, that's a class, or maybe it's a nested class or whatever, the direction with the capital D. And then the all caps thing behind there, that's the same thing that I came across before for the random terrain tiles. And I have no clue how this works in the argument. What is it called? As an argument. But I'll find out. Oh, and that's funny. There I ask, so after that, I ask it what doesn't work in my current code. And it says it appears to work correctly. You have instantiated all 3 corridor zones in the constructor of the corridor tile class. So every instance of corridor tile will contain these 3 zones. Okay, so apparently it works. So the problem is somewhere else. Oh, and apparently I started looking at Stack Overflow as well. Does an instance of superclass get created when we initiate an object? Yeah. My question was whether every time an instance of all those superclasses will created when you create like the lowest subclass that there is, and apparently not. It's that the object that you create contains all those fields and stuff that you define in superclasses, but there's not separate objects that create it. This is the best, but that object is an instance of both the superclass and the subclass, blah, blah, blah. There aren't three separate objects. So it's a union. So, but yeah. Sometimes I even while using ChatGPT, sometimes I just go back to asking something on Google and finding an answer on Stack Overflow, or oftentimes I also go to the official Java. What is it called? That site? Well, the official Java site where you can see an overview of the classes and all their methods, etc., etc. Pretty handy sometimes to have an overview of all that kind of stuff, and also to check if ChatGPT isn't bullshitting. That's pretty handy sometimes. So yeah, at this point I have no idea why my code is working. It's not crashing, not giving errors, but why it isn't drawing those sounds where I want them to be drawn. So now I'm just looking around, in my code, and yeah, trying to speculate what's going wrong. I know now what's going wrong, of course, but at that moment I'm just looking around, and like I said before, it's really painful to watch. But yeah, that's the learning process for me, at least. I'm just there like, what in the world is the problem right now? Okay, so I seem to have decided to paste my whole board class into ChatGPT to see if it has any solutions for me. I want to add all three corridor zones to every instance of corridor tile in this board class. What would be an easy way to do that? Proof. A little pause to read that. One way to add all three corridor zones to every instance of corridor tile is to modify the corridor tile constructor to accept the three corridor zones as parameters. Every time it wants to do everything as parameter. I already have the grid hexagon takes the corridor and the culture tile as a parameter, and like the last example, what was it about? It wanted to also add something to parameters. It's all the time doing that. And like I said, I have very little understanding of best practice regarding putting all kinds of stuff in there and what it actually does. I really need to dig into that, put my teeth into that to get a grip on that. But it seems to have a a love for that solution, because yeah, as far as I know, that's just one of the solutions of things. The more I learn, the more I see that you can do many things in many different ways with the same result, but not necessarily our preferences or best practice. So you want to store it in as instance variables. Then in the image bounded, you can pass new instances of the three corridor zones to each corridor tile. Oh, I should let the page scroll with its answers instead of reading right away. That would be more visual for the footage. Oh, yeah, that's what parameter does. So you give it that as an argument, and then some way of some way of adding. Yeah, that's what I get. It's a way of joining an object to another specific object or a specific instance of that object. So in that way, it's what I'm trying to do with using the code like Legos and sticking stuff on top of other stuff. It seems to not be that weird of an idea. It seems to correspond pretty much with the way I'm trying to do things. So might be might be a good solution. Like I said, no idea if that's the most efficient or best practice, or that will become clear along the way, I hope. I'm sure, but yeah. By the way, after having said all that, I don't think I used this method in the end. As far as I remember, I used it another way, but I'm not 100% sure. Now I'm thinking it's maybe also the way I formulate it, because I'm all the time I'm talking the other examples also. I'm asking it or telling it that I want to add this to that, I want to add that to that. Maybe that's why the sometimes language, especially when translated in programming language in which you have different methods to do different things, the words actually matter. So it's really great that it's a language model that understands language, um, but also then it matters what words you use when you're just describing a thing, but it's translating it to concrete code. Yeah, it can be something different. Oh, and here I see. So I take his advice and I post those as arguments. But then I think I discover, yeah, then that means I have to use those arguments all the time if I'm referring to also all the subclasses of the corridor tile. So I think that's not going to work. We'll see. So yeah, I follow its advice here. Yeah, and I'm doing all this because I got a wrong representation on the result from my code on the in the drawing of the board, and actually it does work. So now I'm trying to change the functionality, but it already did work, in fact. So I think, if I remember correctly, doing all this for nothing. Yeah, now I try to run the code, and then I get that the constructor corridor tile integer with the two arguments is undefined, because now I added um, all these arguments. So then, like I said, all the other ones need that as well, all the other subclasses, because it's a superclass where I added those arguments. So that, yeah, that might work when it was a separate class, or it maybe even work like this. But yeah, I feel to me it looks like a very cumbersome way to do that, and I find another solution, as far as I know. So I think at this point I'm like, I know this is not at all what I want, so I change it again. So now I ask the ChatGPT that I want to instantiate all that in the board class when I generate the board, and it gives me another possibility without all those arguments in the corridor tile constructor. Oh, isn't it that? Yeah, I have to look it up. Aren't arguments the values variables that are passed to the constructor. I really have to dive in that. Let me write that down. So yeah, with this new example, it doesn't use those arguments, so I'm immediately throwing those away in my code. Where should I define the Z zone south, etc. method? That's not at all what I want, the response. So I try to run the code and I get an error, amongst others, corridor sound cannot be resolved or is not a field. Here I had another chat with the ChatGPT about telling it that I don't understand how the tree zone array is passed to the instance of corridor tile. Can you explain more detail? And here it's doing a suggestion of creating an array of corridor zone instances and pass that array to each instance of corridor tile. So this is just, again, another way of doing things. Create an array on each instance of that corridor tile, which contains those three zones. Of course, that's the way also. But yeah, a rather cumbersome solution, it seems to me, for only, for three static shapes that will be repeated on everything. I don't have to do transformations on it, etc., etc. So this seems quite pretty over-engineered to my mind. I do start to implement it here. Oh yeah, already put it in a corridor zone array with a length of 3. But yeah, this is again something as far as I know, as far as I remember, not a thing I'm gonna keep. Yeah, I really didn't keep it very long. I put those back here that I deleted. Up, it's gone. The arrays. Up, okay, that didn't have a very long life. Oh, now I'm putting them back in. That's amazing. Sometimes I really don't have no idea what I'm doing. And a lot of times when I'm fighting like that, suffering, and I'm really stuck on a thing, and then finally I give up and do some other things, etc. And then a lot of the times after a while, I get something in my head like, oh my god, it must be like this or it must be like that. I don't know how it works for other people, but I just sometimes I need a break, and then then it just comes to me. This just have to my brain or my subconscious has to just work through it, and then I'm like, oh, but wait, it might be this or might be that. And when I'm really fixated on the code and in it, and a lot of the times I'm stuck. So here I am a while later, and Ploop finally decided to take those little zone arrays out again. For good now, I think. No, not for good. I put them back into the corridor tile class. I wasted a lot of time on this thing. And like I said, all this still because I thought the code wasn't working, because it was drawing something in the upper left corner and that was it. So I got the code to work in so that it didn't give a big error, and now I'm trying to draw it and access the zones that I put in that little error array. Oh, and then I put in a question but not the code, and I'm just asking ChatGPT how to access the objects. Yeah, that's the way to access the fields. And then I asked to how to access the objects in this array, how to assign the value slash object in this array to another field. Yeah, that's really basic stuff. But I'm asking it because in my board where I have the code to draw the different elements of the board, I couldn't seem to access it the way I expected it. So after a lot of fiddling, I got um, I'm starting. I'm running my code here. So after creating all this, um, I actually got it to work again, but still with the thingy in the upper left corner only. So all this work, I I used the solution with those arrays that GPT suggested me, and I fiddled with those things in the arguments, all that stuff, just to arrive arrive at the same result as before. So, but at least I'm learning all kinds of different ways of doing the same thing. Um, but I'm actually not addressing the problem in all of this. So this is, I admit, watching this, it's long and it's pretty frustrating. But like, yeah, I'm, yeah, it's trying all these things. I'm learning all kinds of ways how things work. So that's great. So I'm trying. So now that I understood that all of that I changed hadn't changed the thing, actually hasn't changed the thing. Um, I decided apparently to take out the textures to better see it. Trying all kinds of weird shit. So yeah, just to better see what's going on. So I decided to ask Stack Overflow for help, how to add a specific value to position in an array. That's so pretty obvious stuff. Looking on the Oracle website, the Java official Java documentation on stuff about arrays. I'm honestly not sure, as usual, why I'm looking all of this stuff up at this moment. What I think will, what I think I will solve with it. So apparently, I decided to take out the zones array with the 3 zones and replace it again with instantiating each zone, a variable to which I assign an instance of those zones. And now I seem to have decided to take that code where I create the zones and put it in the grid class. Well, need to tidy up the code, of course, essential. And so yeah, I'm testing and I'm trying to find things out. Here I have I got an error, so oh yeah, I have to change what I tried to draw, of course. And I can't find it. And that's because I just moved the zones directly to the grid hexagon class, so I can access it directly like that without the chord or down in between. And here I test it again, and it's again doing the thing in the upper left corner, and I can already tell. I can tell you, I know what in the end what happened, um, and it has nothing to do with everything that I'm trying here. It's someplace entirely different. Another thing that I did when I created those zones. Um, in the video I made about that, I showed that, and I'm not sure when I find out. It's just going on for a long time, and I still have quite of a bit in this video ahead of me. And yeah, like in the end, probably also because I take a break and I'm like, oh wait a minute, and it's in the end, it's I think at least partially, but for a big part, maybe even thanks to the highlight function I have um, that highlights all those shapes, because suddenly at a certain point I see what's going on actually, and it brings me to an uh, to dive into a concept. Uh, yeah, it takes me on a little voyage about how things are connected in the code and between the code and the graphics, etc., etc. But yeah, I can tell you that everything I'm trying here has nothing to do with what the actual problem is. And uh, actually, in the beginning, when the code worked and I had the little triangle in the upper left corner, everything was most was working correctly. At least what I'm trying to change now. So, but somewhere I see the light suddenly, someplace, someday. It took a long time, especially when I'm looking back this, and it's not a continuous recording, so it took me quite some time. Might have cost me a few days. Well, not full-time days, but might have been spread out over a few days actually. I seem to want to post my board and my grid class in here to ChatGPT, and I'm telling it that I want to initiating a grid hexagon to add. I want to add the 3 corridor zones to each grid hexagon. How could I do this? Please. It's the same answer. It's talking about an array. That's the same stuff that I had before. Apparently I thought maybe when I post both classes it has other ideas. But like I said, it's all working. So it's me that isn't working. I it's yeah. When I finally find out what's wrong, it's actually pretty amazing. It has nothing to do with everything I'm doing here. So, but yeah, it's just a slightly different way of what I was already doing, what it said before. So that doesn't go anywhere new at least. And now I'm moving the little array of the 3 corridor zones to the board class again. I moved it from the corridor tile to the grid class to now to the board, which might work as well, probably. Like I said, I'm starting to see more and more that it's pretty we can be pretty flexible in how we code things, where we define stuff, etc. It's also because I have a lot of redundancy in my code. I have a lot of nested classes and subclasses, superclasses, abstract. Most of those are just for the board elements, and everything that's below that And then I have just a few classes in my next chapter where I start to try to put on the first unit, etc. I go more into the user interface and the game loop class, etc. But actually, what I have so far, for me, it's kind of a lot of the times it looked complex, but it's actually pretty simple, pretty basic. There's not much going on there, so it's not easy to mess things up. It's easy to mess it up, but not very impressively. I don't have thousands of lines of code in the end. It's just my little untrained head that has difficulty wrapping itself, wrapping its brain around everything that's going on. Yeah, I will probably redo much of the code, etc. And when I understand better how it all works and how it all comes together. But like this, like searching for an answer to a non-existing problem, or there's a problem but it's elsewhere, is, yeah, like I said, I'm learning a lot about the different ways of doing things and the flexibility actually of the way of doing things. So that's it takes a lot of time, but it's very useful. So yeah, now I have this array code here in the board class. Oh, why not? Why the hell not? It's worth a try. Oh, I get the error message in the board class for the corridor zones array. I get the error message. Only final is allowed. This error message indicates that you cannot change the value of the zones array after it has been initialized. In Java, final values are immutable, meaning their value cannot be changed after they have been set. Oh yeah, I'm just trying to assign values twice in the code probably. Yeah, it's still in the corridor tile. It's still present. Oh. That's something I do a lot. I'm moving some stuff around and then I forgot to disable it elsewhere, take it out or whatever, or delete it. That's stuff I do a lot. Here again, I'm taking over some code from ChatGPT and trying to put it all in the arguments, the 3 zones. I know. Yeah, here I have the arguments, culture, and corridor tile, and I'm uh, adding the zone array in the arguments, something GPT suggested. Yeah, after all this, I should also know how I can get rid of those culture tile argument and corridor tile arguments after reviewing all this footage again. And yeah, I should really be able to do that now. Well, we'll see about that later. Running the code again, and the same thing. It's doing something in the upper left corner, and that's it. So every time it's running, at least the code works, and the draw also works. I know it's drawing the right thing. It's just isn't drawing it in the right place. That's what I know now. Here again, asking stupid questions. Oh man, stupid questions don't exist. That's what they say. I find myself pretty stupid sometimes. So I posted a code snippet why that doesn't work inside the board class constructor. So it's explaining about a local variable. Jamais. I never say. I can never pronouns. Pro. So I decided to post a code snippet why this code doesn't work inside the board class constructor, and it explains something about a local variable, etc., and only accessed within the scope where it's declared, and that I should declare it elsewhere outside of the constructor or the methods, etc., etc. Very simple question, stupid question, but yeah, very useful when it's talking about scope, etc. Those are terminologies that, yeah, at least for me, it's like, oh, wait. I'm starting to get some concept clearer again. So yeah, it's always very useful. So this hour-long search for what's going wrong uh, did learn me a lot of things. So I'm searching around here, still fixated on that three corridors of stuff. Well, it was super easy, and I got it to work in the rather quickly. Like it's hours later in the even in the footage. I don't know how many real time has passed. I didn't pay much attention to the time and the date on the. Um, this code doesn't seem to work inside the init random board method. Yeah, that's a method where I initiate the random board. That's not a constructor, actually. So maybe my last question was, yeah, I was being stupid. That's not a constructor, that's a method. Random board. So this is a static block that initializes the correlation array with the fields of color. Static block is execute only once when the board class is loaded. Yeah, that's okay. Because it should be, that's the thing that not it's not like the random terrain. Those zones are always the same and should be available for every instance of the corridor tile. So that should be okay. In the constructor of this board class, I only call the initiate random board method. That's the whole, and that's the entire constructor of that class. So yeah, and just assign them to every hexagon. I actually want to assign them to every corridor tile, but because I need relations later on, I'm worried about relations. I can just throw everything in it and tell it to draw this there and that there, and then it's okay. But I need relations between those classes as far as I know. I don't know enough to know whether that's true or not. But for me, logically, yeah, they need to be there. It's not like I throw everything inside the place where the grid area is, and then I throw out a pile of other stuff. Yeah, that might even, yeah, while I'm saying it out loud, yeah, that might even work as long as they all have the same WH coordinates, the same position in the array. They have a relationship in that way, a mathematical relationship. So that might even be enough, actually. That's the thing that connects them. Yeah. So now telling it I need the W and H variable. gives me a loop. I'm making things way too complicated here. I'm mixing everything up. I don't even know how I'm mixing things up, but I know it's too complicated what I'm doing. It wanted something with a static, this or that. Oh my god, it's such a mess. Oh my god, it hurts. So I hope that I'm starting to zero in on the actual problem now, finally, because it's, yeah, of course I don't know what I'm saying over there, but I tried to use a simplified version of um, those points I have here, like x looped and y looped, and x looped plus side, y looped, etc. Those are my x and y coordinates, and x and y looped are how do you say it? They are transformed in every grid position by a little function that I have that sets x and the I point for the WH coordinates. It's a transformation, and I try to assign a point here, um, simply like the lower left, upper left, etc., to make it more easy to use them. And I thought that was enough to make it work. Yeah, and then I used those in my last video to define those corridor zone shapes. And actually, I realized at a certain point, I realized myself that what I was seeing when I draw the board, when I run my code, on the upper left corner. Oh, pause. See if I mouse over. When I mouse over the grid, you see that it highlights the shapes, and when it's two shapes intersecting each other, it highlights it double, etc. And when I go to the upper left corner, it's a solid white. And when I go to the other shapes, it's just grayish, because I have it filled with white but transparent. So what I realized at a certain point is that it is drawing all those shapes, but it's drawing them all in the same place, in the right place on top of that, and it's a triangle. But it's drawing them all on the same spot, one on top of the other, because I try to use those simplified names to get coordinates for my path here, which I create, but they don't get transformed. And I'm sure I can make that work. I was thinking, yeah, I'm using those complicated coordinates, XY notations all the time for the coordinates, and I just assign those to a variable, but then I defined them as static on top of that, so they cannot be transformed. And maybe I can fix it like that, or create a method for it. I'm not exactly sure how to do that, but I know I'm sure it's possible. Like here is showing my oh, no, it's okay. I'm already pretty much zoomed in. Here's that set xi for WH, xy, excuse me, and that's just like those are measurements based on the hexagon, and the side and the long leg, the same stuff I use to define all those things. Those are based on triangle math and inside of the hexagon, etc., etc. So for every array position that I move to the right and I move down, this gets this gets translated. And so yeah, maybe it would be enough if I get rid of the static in the declaring the line over there. Line 2D. New line. Oh, those are lines. Yeah, no, the other is points. Yeah, maybe it's enough when I get rid of the static. I'm not sure. But anyway, so that was the problem that I was looking for hours and hours why I didn't work. What's wrong in my code? It's because I used something that that doesn't get displaced, and it set me off on a little voyage. I was thinking at a certain point, what was it? I don't even remember, but I was like, I was mixing up. After this, I think I was mixing up, or I was asking myself why. Or maybe I asked ChatGPT, but I was totally mixing up what's actually happening in the code and the transformation to drawing a thing. I was like, it's weird that I have this array and etc. How to explain that? Yeah, an array with stuff in there, even if it's shapes, doesn't necessarily have a place on a screen. And then the draw library, etc. That's in, in Java is used to translate some code in some array into a, a pixels and a position on a screen. And I was messing all of that up in my head. But this was a very good lesson um, to make the difference between, because when I'm working with it, I'm mixing up in my head, of course, the visual and the code below that has nothing to do. It doesn't know anything about whatsoever about visuals. It's just code in an array. It doesn't have a physical position in space. So um, it took me off on a little tangent. So here's the problem. That's on top of that, it's a static shape as well. So normally that cannot be transformed. And I use a lot of static because the basic measurements shouldn't be changed later on. So yeah, I finally, after hours of fiddling around and searching, I finally found the problem. Yeah, and it probably came to me thanks to that highlight function, if I remember correctly. Like some place I was like, but no, it's drawing them, but it's drawing them on top of each other, all the shapes. Oh yeah, and there was something that was going a bit weird in my head, like how can that shape be drawn over there on the left upper corner, separate from the other things on the screen? But like I said, that's realization came a bit later that it doesn't visually, it doesn't have anything to do with the code that's in there. The step to visually represent it is completely separate from the code or where it is in the code, if it's attached to this shape or that thing, that doesn't matter for it, except of course when I use all kinds of functionality that's integrated in those shapes, etc., etc. There's functionality. Maybe that's confusing as well. In Java, in the shape class, there's functionality for things like intersection, etc. So there's some feedback from what is happening on screen back to the code. Like, and with the mouse, I have a highlight function that um, it just says the pointer is in that shape, then highlight it. So there's sort of a back and forth between what's on the screen and what's in the code in that sense. But there's of course a lot of code behind that in their libraries. Otherwise, to make life more easy and to make that stuff a bit more accessible. But in in the thing I was battling with here, it can be kind of confusing that there's not really a relation between stuff that is in my array and stuff that is on the screen. So yeah, it's sometimes it can be a bit confusing. Can be a lot confusing. So yeah, well, I'm happy for the second time that I finally arrived in the point in my footage where I identified the problem. So there's like almost 50 minutes left of the footage, and now I'm deciding, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna put those x looped, y looped coordinates in there and just make it work. Because after all these hours, I was, of course, not really feeling like trying to make it work like that. Maybe I should have, but yeah. Now like I said, I'm sure it works, but I'm not sure exactly how to do it. It's probably super simple, like most of these things. So, what is handy though is that now I have all the vertices I have written here, what the corresponding x and y coordinates are in that scientifically language here. So that's very handy now that when I need them, at least. Near the center point hexagon is also the point that I use for the zones, for the corridor zones. So apparently I'm thinking really hard if this is going to work. Yeah, so I'm afraid it doesn't going to work because it's not using the W and H coordinate and the X looped Y looped, but I think it does because it just gets the base hexagon shape that probably is using that stuff. That's just a path. And yeah, and just gets the bounce of that shape and then the center point. Those shape libraries are pretty useful for that stuff. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh no, that's not the center point, the hexagon center point. That's the culture the vertex where I wanted to have the culture tau on. I have these variables in all caps. I'm not even sure. I know I wrote it down, but I'm not even sure anymore what was the difference with all caps and small caps and just lowercase. Totally don't remember at all. Maybe those were final, unchangeable, or at least in the code unchangeable. Not sure at all. I have to look that up again. It's pretty funny rewatching all this. It's long, very, very long. But I did learn quite a few things just rewatching all this and reviewing myself suffer. So here I'm reviewing my hexagon mat because, like I said, like a minute ago, all those measurements are based on triangle mat, which are used in hexagon shape. And it was a long time ago, so I spent some time reviewing some of the math because and this is a great website. This Red Blob Games. It's years ago when I was starting all this out. This is amongst others where I got my my science for my math, etc. for adding it to my bookmarks because I don't have those bookmarks anymore. It was on an old computer and didn't port them over. So, but this is a amazing website for anything grid related to grids and everything. He has like animated and like I'm showing here animated grids and with all the coordinates in it, and you can change the orientation with the buttons to the side from pointy up to flat up, and it's such a beautiful website. It's just a piece of a work of art, a piece of art. Yeah, with all kinds of maths, all kinds of code. A lot of the times it's I think focused mostly on C plus. What is it? C plus plus? I'm not even sure at the moment. But many times even you can even choose which language. Well, you choose between two or something. But that's not the point of his site. It's just the math and the math translated to code. In fact, it's and the basic principles remain the same. So stuff for neighbors, how to find your neighbors, etc., etc. Distances. This is really beautiful. This is like I think the most beautiful resource I came across when researching that stuff like years ago. And there's a lot of theory about it, and that's amazing. And it's all just there because like kind of a passion project, or I don't know exactly how it makes his living. But I was actually looking not for that, but I was looking for like I said, I use and I found found my notes back when I was doing this. But this looks pretty complicated. Yeah, this is not what I need, all this stuff. It's way more simple. Oh yeah, I'm explaining here, I know, because I'm highlighting my math square root. Actually, my circle is uh, just, how do you say it? It has a point, a center point, and then it's just endless amounts of uh, very small triangles, and also the the size of the hexagon. And that's no, I'm talking crap, I think. Maybe that's what I started with. But the relationship between the size of my hexagon and the other measurements, it's using that kind of math. Oh, I wanted to create a center point here. That's why I'm starting to look it up. But later on I will need it because I made an error in drawing in defining my three corridor zones, if I remember correctly. So yeah, here I want to have the same kind of code for my center point like the rest. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, here's the kind of math that I'm using for my hexagon. Yeah, just Pythagoras, but yeah, I have some other lines that go from one vertex to the other, but in fact with relations between the length of these lines A, B, and C, you can calculate the whole all the offsets like I do for the other coordinates. You can calculate how far the other one should be away, etc. And that's what I do when I transform with the XY loop. And yeah, like I said, with the other circle math gives a relation between the length of the side C and what is it again? The circumference. And I can't even repeat it like that, but from the top of my head. So, but that's what you see in the long leg side and short leg that I have in my code. That's that B is the short leg, A is the long leg, and C is the side. Yes. So instead of defining that center point with the basic math, I apparently decided to define it with the uh, the, the 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 fields I have with the capitals. Apparently, I decided to define it like the other ones with the X loop, Y looped thingies, which seems to be very reasonable. When I started with this like an hour ago in the footage, I was like, oh yeah, you should just use that. And I finally did. Great. Still it takes some time, but so trying out the new zones and the effects, it does something, and at least it does about in the right place. I'm probably drawing just one right now. Yeah, the south one, but the point up there of the triangle thingy should be in the middle of the corridor shape, and it's now all the way up there in the point of the hexagon. So, like I said, I have to figure out the math a bit. See if I find it. The one that yeah, now it goes down. Now it goes the same length but down. It's the same height or length? Not really sure. Visually there. But I changed the plus in a minus and or the other way around, and now yeah, minus in a plus probably because up is minus, down is plus. I think, yeah. And it's too far. It should be a half or something. So I need to play around with the math a bit here, and I probably have my math next to me on paper right now when I'm making this. Or math. It's more a bit of geometry, like this stuff. I had some of this stuff on paper. Some other. Now I tried it. Now it was working. I think at least it was quite quick. So yeah, here it's kind of working. Yeah, it goes to the middle. All right, and there we see the two in the upper left corner, the two other zones that are definitely there, but not in the right place. So now I have to make the other two zones work. Oh yeah, yeah. So wait a second. So there's the other two zones, and yeah, when I stop scrolling up and down a bit. Yeah, so like I said, I have these vertices now with the XY coordinates like that, so I can just if I find the right one, I can just copy paste them in the place of the placeholders that I try to use there. Um, where am I? Yeah, I'm there. One advantage of this method is that I don't need the get x get y method after the point, because that's a point, and those are really x and y coordinates that, like I said, I create from the starting point and the WH double UH, yeah, transformation that happens when I create the array. So it only works because the array is created with a loop, and every loop, every place in the, every iteration of the loop and every place in the array, it's transformed. Because actually in the defining the array in the board, when I initialize the board, that's where the value get assigned to the W and the H effect. So, and it's just like it's uh, two right, three down. So it's just two times that, three times that, etc. That's what's happening. Pretty simple, actually. So it seems like I changed them all. And it seems to be funny business. I know it seems to. No, I have some weird lines still here. I do have three shapes, but the line in the middle shouldn't be there. Shouldn't it? No, the line in the middle down, there's in the zone down, the one up there should be there. But there's one line that shouldn't be there. Then I just have to find out which one is not right, not defined right. But now I can, for example, disable the first one, the south one, and then and one of the other ones, and see which one is doing the weird stuff. So now it's pretty easy. Yeah, I draw them all. I can just switch them off in the even in the draw function, of course. So I draw them all individually. Corridor zones. All right. Now I think I have the brilliant idea to comment one out. Two. See what it does. So yeah, that's not like anything I want to see. It's just freaking out. So it's definitely this one that isn't doing the right thing. And it was the west one that's not tagged out. Which is obviously weirding out. And trying the east one for good measure. And it's doing weird things as well, like samey weird things. Not good. So I have something. I definitely have something messed up in the points here. I'm obviously pretty busy figuring out my yeah my triangle stuff. Like it's a bit different. Like sometimes, like here you have, I have 1/3 up. It's separated. It's divided by 3, so that's a third, and on times 2, I need 2/3. It's sometimes I need the length, especially I think the long side, and I need to go down um, a third or go up 2/3 of that, etc., etc. So I'm trying to find out where I went wrong with all that. I think I redraw the thing because what I found were um, the notes that I found weren't very clear. So I think I redraw it and I redrew it. I drew it again, I think. And once you have it before you're on paper, it's pretty obvious. But when you see it in code like this, it's pretty hard to understand what's actually going on. So, but it's super logic. So once it's clear, so here I have some other freaky effect. I do like this grid, this board without the textures. It's pretty. I think it's pretty arty. It's pretty stylish. Trying the other one that seems to do about the same thing. There's the same. Or was it okay? No, it wasn't okay. Was it? What did I find? Oh yes, it was okay. I thought it was, but it looked weird. So yeah, there I have it. Finally, I have. I think it's pretty beautiful like this. So finally, I found. Yeah, you see, and now you see the whole hexagon separated in 3. That's the 3 zones I was talking about. But you see the corridor shape on top of that that's separated. So in the end, the points of those forms won't be visible, of course. And what gets highlighted, etc., etc. It's all to find out. But I'm finally there. This took me way too long to do this. Took me way longer even to create this stupid video because, like I said, I had like about 6 hours of recording without sound. Then I started to review it and cut it down, taking out the stuff that where nothing was happening, and taking notes to do the voiceover later. Then I was like, no, I can just play the footage and do the voiceover straight away and skip the part where I cut pieces out and where I take notes. And then I did that, and almost an hour in, I stopped, and then later to continue later. Here's the thing with the textures, and you see all the lines, of course. And you do see that there's a certain order in the some lines go under the circles. If you look closely. So, but then I started recording, and there was a problem with the sound again, so for almost about an hour of footage. And then now I started again. Now I'm almost at the end. But I hope this will never happen again. This whole thing took me like hours and hours. I now have a bit under 3.5 hours of recording again, but that was from 6 hours, and there's quite some stuff that I can take out. When I was recording, etc. But my God, this was a horror show. But I didn't want to throw it away because, like, the end, like the result I get, I have changed the whole grid. It functions another way than it was before, and yeah, it was really hard struggle, but like, yeah, here it works. So even doing this like for a second time, it's pretty satisfying, I must admit. But yeah, this was a real horror show. Yeah. So here we are playing with the highlights, being satisfied with it. If you made it this far, thanks a lot for watching and being witness to my suffering. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.